All right, what is up, guys? It's Halsey Schider with the Helicopter Podcast, and I am coming at you today with a really fun, exciting episode. I say it and I'll say it again. I love what I do because I get to chat with really awesome people throughout the entire industry, and today's guest is that encapsulated. I'm so excited to have Kodey Bogart on the podcast today. I was joking with her before we got on. If we go through her entire CV, I think this podcast would be like 3 days long. Background is incredible. She has so much experience, and she's even an author for a children's book, Helo Girls. So excited to talk about that. Of course, to MHM Publishing and the Vertical HeliCASTS family and platform. We are so grateful for you and allowing us and making all this possible so we can have these wonderful conversations, and so happy to have our sponsors on board, of course. So thank you to you, and of course to the listeners. Thank you guys for reaching out. Recently, I've actually had a barrage of messages on Instagram, LinkedIn, and other platforms, and you've been sharing your journey, your stories with me. And I love it. It's like why I do this. Again, I never thought anyone would listen to the podcast. And so the fact now that people are messaging and reaching out and taking some type of fulfillment or learning something is just incredible. So I'm so honored to have you listening. Kodey, good morning and welcome to the Helicopter Podcast. How are you?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it's so fun. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. You and I have actually been chatting now off and on for a couple months, and so I'm glad that we're able to nail it down, and thank you for the time. I'm really excited. I just had a daughter, as you know, and so I'm, of course, excited to talk about Helo Girls and what that's all about and what was kind of the precipice around creating this series of books. But before so, I just want to learn a little bit more about you. Your background, like I said in the intro there, a very impressive resume, CV, and so just excited to learn more about you. But let's start with you, just a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, well, first let me start by saying thank you for bringing another Helo girl into the world. We need more of us.
Yeah, so, totally.
Thank you to you and your lovely wife.
Yeah, really, she did all the work.
My adventure in aviation started just from one morale flight when I was in the military, because I wasn't in aviation at the time. And I went on one morale flight, and it was in a Black Hawk, and I was sitting in the crew chief's seats, and I had to go up like 6 more times. I absolutely loved it, and I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I had not known it was an opportunity when I first joined the military. So that morale flight really was a precipice for me to just alter the course of my life. And I actually have a photo of that moment, and I call it my chiclets moment, because my smile was so big. I was really nothing but teeth, and just a great moment in my life.
I personally have had this love affair with helicopters and really more so aviation since I came out. I think my daughter is 3 weeks old now. So I don't think it's quite 3 weeks, but I think at like 2 years old, I think, I was already pointing up and saying, airplane, and always just knew that was my direction. So I always actually find it fascinating because I've had a lot of people on the podcast that have similar kind of experience like me, where it's like, you were born to be a pilot. And then I've had other folks like you that kind of stumbled upon into it. And then to see a career like yours blossom from that one moment, this morale flight, that's just incredible. What kind of inspired you to join the military in the first place?
Yeah, so not unlike a lot of kids in this world who go through a lot of things, I didn't have the best home life. And my brother, who's 3 years older than me, he actually joined the Navy. And he's my best friend. He's my best friend still to this day. And I just wanted to be closer to him and kind of get away from the home life that we both experienced. So I actually enlisted in the Navy. And a few months before I was supposed to ship out, I ended up meeting someone who was in the Army National Guard. And I learned more about that. And I decided to switch from from the Navy to the Army Guard. And so that was kind of that shift for me. But I never got close to my brother. I mean, as far as being on the same ship or anything like that, but we stayed really close from that point forward. One of the best decisions, again, that I made to join the military. But mine really was to just get away from a home life, which is sadly, a reason why a lot of people join the military is, a growth and opportunity that they might not have had elsewise.
Well, I think that's really the magic of the military, right? Is that the military is almost non-discriminate in who they want to come in. I don't know how it works completely. I'm guessing that there's maybe some people that they don't let in, but by and large, a volunteer, paid position that you're able to go in, learn a skill. I, again, was very lucky. I always knew what I wanted to do. So that was never like a question for me. I also had a fantastic upbringing. So like different scenarios, certainly for me. But I always encourage young people that are kind of like, well, I don't really know what I want to do, to go and maybe at least consider a career in the military. I've had so many friends that joined the military. They learned a skill. They had a great time. They made long-lasting, friendships, people that they're in touch with to this day. And a lot of them didn't even fly in the military, but then they used the GI benefits to go to a 141 training school after and, have a majority, if not all, of their education paid for, which I think is incredible. Flight school is super expensive. I think one of the most common questions that I get is like, how do I pay for flight school? And it's like, well, you either have money, your parents or family gives you money, or you go to the military and you learn in the military, or use your GI Bill post-military. So what was that?
So, or you go into great debt.
And actually, the day that my daughter was born, June 14th, I paid off my student loan. I went into giant debt.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. I've been paying that off for a long time. So I was lucky to get away from that. But, really commendable for you joining the military. I'm guessing once a year during the Army-Navy football game, is there any sibling rivalry going on there?
No, my brother got out of the Navy pretty early in his career, and he really never kind of followed through with a lot of stuff with that down the road. I will always root for the Army just because it's fun. But I happen to be... I like to root for the underdog typically, but I'm an antagonistic. So whoever's playing, like whoever you're going to root for, I could care less. I'm going to root for the other team just because I want that gameplay in the room.
Yeah, nice. A little contrarian never hurts anyone.
Absolutely. Keep it interesting.
So you enter the military without this idea that you're going to fly helicopters, and then you go on these flights. A switch is flipped. Excitement is born. And then you decide you, I guess, want to fly helicopters. What did that look like in the military setting of navigating that process? I was not in the military. I know enough, but not enough all the time to fully understand. I do know that typically the military will tell you kind of, hey, you're going to go and do this. So how do you kind of veer away from what you were originally doing to get into the cockpit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I think for my case, it was a little bit different in that I was active duty for the National Guard. So there's a lot more flexibility. At the point I was doing human resources in the military. I had actually found out I could not be a pilot because of my eyesight. People knew that I wanted to be a pilot. At the time, I was working in our state headquarters here in Florida, not far from the state aviation office. They knew I wanted to be a pilot. And a gentleman who's my mentor to this day, when he found out that the Army and the Navy were getting together for a research study program in refractive surgery, he came to me, told me about this study, and suggested that I apply. So in 2004, I did, and I was accepted. So that was a big catalyst. Now, from the time of that morale flight, it was probably let's see, I joined in 97. So that was probably in 99. I didn't go to flight school until 2004. So I was already an NCO by this time, a non-commissioned officer. I'd been in a few years, around 7 years or so by that point. So it was, had that study not come about for pilots to have this type of surgery, it would have never have happened for me in the military. So that was, an honor to be part of that study program.
Talk to me just a little bit about that procedure, because that's another thing that I hear a lot is like, man, my vision's bad, or I can't be a pilot. I've been blessed with good vision. It's starting to go on me, actually. I can tell that I think for my next medical, I'm going to need to get some corrective lenses, because the little bottom line is getting a little bit harder for me. But up until this point, 37 years, knock on wood, I've had pretty good eyesight. But it's great to hear that you had success, and I'm sure there's folks listening that might be kind of going through. So what was that all about?
Yeah, so in the military, when you first...
Like a LASIK?
Yeah, so the study was doing LASIK, and they were also doing PRK, which, since this is going to be aired, I'm not going to try to say what PRK really stands for, because I'll just embarrass myself.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
LASIK, there's an incision on the eye. They move the flat back. They do the laser. They put the flat back. And then you're basically 20/20 or 20/15, depending on how well your eye heals. I did PRK, so it's a little bit different. It's basically the same procedure, except for it looked like to me like an electric toothbrush, kind of just cleaned off the outer layer of the eye. They did the laser. The healing time is a bit longer. I chose that one because, to me, it would appear that there would be less chance for scar tissue. Scar tissue would create halos or starbursts along, in your vision, which then could preclude me from going further in the study or being accepted. Because of, those would impair my ability to move forward. So I did PRK. I ended up with 20/15. I have no starbursts, no halos, no issues from that surgery. Luckily, during flight school, it was actually accepted for pilots to have both LASIK and PRK. So that's, a great success for young aviators who want to come into the field in the military, and obviously in the civilian sector as well. Yeah, so just really excited to have been able to have the opportunity to do that. And for yourself, and I'm to the point now, the cornea, the outer layer of your eye, is naturally going to harden as you get older. So everybody, even if you've had some sort of refractive surgery, is going to end up needing reading glasses and things like that.
Yeah, I thought I was going to escape it. My parents actually didn't get readers until like their late 40s. I don't know if it's because I have more screen time than they both had. I don't know, but yeah, it's weird. It goes like I feel like I can see great, and then I do that test, and I'm like, oh man, I'm KL. It just gets quite challenging, and so yeah. In fact, I just scheduled an optometry appointment. So be my first go at seeing exactly where my eyesight's at. But that's great. Great technology to allow people to continue on their journey of wanting to be a pilot. For the civilian side, I'm not quite sure what the actual regs are. I do know that if you fail the eye test specifically, then you would have to get corrective lenses. You take it again, then you have a remark on your medical certificate essentially saying, hey, you must wear corrective lenses. Right. I've also had friends that have failed the color blindness test. And we actually had a guest on probably about a year ago that talked about doing an alternative. I think it's called the Farnsworth Lantern. I'm digging deep in the archive here. Being able to do this secondary test that helped him actually get his medical. He had a 20-year military career because he was told he could never fly because his color blindness. And then after 20 years of actually being a musician in the military, when he deployed and was a musician and pretty cool MOS. After 20 years, he learned that he could do this Farnsworth Lantern alternative test, and now he's flying. So super cool.
Yeah, good for him. That's awesome. You can still follow your dream.
you gotta do it. So a large gap. So in that gap from your morale flight to then flight school in 2004, you said it's almost 7 years. I mean, were you like eagle eye, pun intended, of like still wanting to become a pilot, or that's a long gap. I mean, I feel like the camp high, so to speak, might have kind of dwindled at that point.
I still wanted to be. I still had a lot of friends in the aviation unit. I like to get around the helicopters when I could. I was in the military. I had I had planned on being in like for 30 years. That was my goal. I had no idea about flying in the civilian sector. I mean, I joined the military at 17. Like being a civilian was not something I fully understood. So I thought I'd stay in for 30 years. I was doing human resources work at the time. I anticipated becoming a warrant in that branch. So I just never crossed my mind otherwise. So again, very lucky that my mentor came to me and said something to me. Just another course alteration in my life.
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, HR is also cool, but flying helicopters. So tell me about your flight experience in the Army, a little bit about what the training was like for you, and then actually deploying into the cockpit, flying, and then the mission specific set that you were working on.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway secret word. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's secret word is heliport. Visit contests.verticalhelicasts.com to enter the secret word.
I think for me, luckily, I'm definitely a book and regulation nerd. Like I love to read the black and white and the regulations. It's never been a challenge for me. And studying has never been. I really love flashcards. I highly recommend those for everybody.
I'm going to tangent real fast. Flashcards are the best. So sorry, I'm going to get a tangent because I'm guessing that there's people like me. I'm not a good student. I was not good at school. I got good grades because I worked hard, essentially. But I struggled. I didn't enjoy. I hate reading to this day. Actually, I listen to all my reading is through audiobooks. I will read Helo Girls, of course, though.
It might be at your reading level.
Yeah. Who knows? But something in aviation, and I struggled when I went to flight school. It was like, man, I just want to fly. I don't want to read this stupid FAR-AIM and I don't want to read this rotorcraft flying manual. It was all too much for me. And so actually a hard part for me in learning how to fly helicopters, I was pretty young at the time, 18 years old, I had to figure out how I best learned. And for me, that discovery was flashcards. And it turns out that I have like a photographic memory, and sometimes that's good and bad, right? Sometimes you just memorize things and you can pass the test essentially. But what I found over time is I could memorize everything super quick using flashcards. But then through that whole process, I started to learn it. I was able to then correlate it to why I was learning it. When I went to Maverick helicopters in the Grand Canyon, they're real big on emergency procedures, which you should be. But they want like verbatim. And for the EC-130, there's, a lot of EPs. Some of them are like 3 pages long. Smoke in the cockpit will go on and on and on and on. And yeah, for like, 3 months leading up to my training date there, flashcards. And I went in there and I think the feedback I got was like, we don't think we've had anyone recite EPs like that. And so if you're listening to the podcast and you're not like Kodey in the sense that you're a bookworm or you're great at studying naturally, figure out what works best for you. In my case, it was flashcards. Maybe it's, there's other online tools now and there's other ways of learning. But you had to figure out your learning style. And that actually was like a huge turning point for me because there was a minute in flight school, call it halfway through, had finished my private, but really was stalling out commercial. And it was kind of like, man, if I figure out how to study, I can be a pilot. If I can't figure it out, then I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll go to trade school and do something else, right? And so being able to find that was like my ticket in. So I just want to tangent on that because I'm guessing that there's listeners out there that, might feel a little bit
overwhelmed,
crazed when they're looking at. And nowadays, it's been like, I don't know, 15 plus years since I've taught, say, FAR-AIM. Man, I could probably still go crazy on it. I taught it for so long and became so knowledgeable about it. I actually ended up liking it. So it's just crazy how that all works. So anyway, I cut you off. You were talking about how you like to study and things like that and kind of your path into the cockpit.
Yeah, no, so that's great though. But I mean, flashcards are beneficial. When I was at Fort Rucker, which is now Novacell, very hard to change that verbiage. But, when you're writing flashcards, you're writing it. So you're saying it more than 3 times. So you're getting that repetition and you're seeing it. So you're getting the visual. It really helps. But in addition, through my primary training, we had in my peer group, we had a group of friends who would help each other study. And specifically, we had one friend who would fall behind, unfortunately, quite a bit. So every night we would go to the library and we would teach him. And I also didn't, this was also a really good moment for me because as I become a CFI and a double I in my civilian world, I just remember back to teaching him and talking at the whiteboard every day at the library. So those are things that helped me be successful. I'm also the type of person, I don't know how to sit still. I love to be saturated. I love to be busy. Flying an aircraft is exactly that. Each hand is doing something different. Your feet are doing something different. There's a multitude of radios happening. You're looking in different verticals and different planes. And I thrive in that type of environment. So that was also something that worked well for me. I'm social. I make friends. I thought I just had a good time at flight school. You work hard, you play hard. And when those times are, and you don't cross the line between those two. So when it's work time, you work, and when it's play time, you play. I think those are what helped me be successful in flight school. I think for me, maybe at a bit of a disadvantage, I wasn't a crew chief coming into flight school, but at the same time, that was also a strength. I had no preconceived notions. I had no
blank slate,
bad habits or experiences. I remember in basic training when it come to firing, your M16, you go to the range, you're in a line, and the drill sergeant, he's like, "Have you fired a weapon before?" No. Okay, you go this way. Yes, you go this way. No, you go this way. Because they know if you have fired a weapon before, they have to recalibrate you. They have to fix your bad habits. So I think for me in flight school, I had none of those bad habits or other knowledge that had to be corrected, right? They knew I was kind of a clean slate, right, for learning. I will say in my UH-60 course, it was really funny. There was a former Apache pilot, this old guy, and I would always get not stuck, but I wanted to know every single thing. When did this little red button pop for this pressure sensor on the tail rotor? And when did this little red button pop here for this, And he came up to me, he's like, "Kodey, who cares when that little red button pops?" He goes, "What you need to know is what to do when it does."
Yeah.
And it completely changed my perspective on how I studied. Because he's right. It's important to know when it does, but who cares? I just need to know what is my action as a pilot when that happens. And that really, really helped me, that little nugget,
Yeah, it's great advice, honestly. It's I've thought about that a lot because sometimes I wonder, because I'm not detail oriented like it sounds like you are. I just want to get into the cockpit and go. And then I can fill in some of the details later. And when it comes to the knowledge aspects of, say, systems, weather, regulations, I always my mindset was I want to know enough to be safe. I need to know the level that can keep me safe in the aircraft. And specifically when it came to systems, through teaching and just getting older and understanding things better, I've now feel pretty well versed in helicopter systems and how it all functions. But, for a long time, honestly, I was well, I'm not going to cloud my RAM storage with why this filter is this micron level and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to figure out okay, if I'm flying a helicopter and something bad happens, what do I do? Mm-hmm. And right. I think it's good to have a mixture of both, right? I've seen it actually in the military. I think that they've changed the way that they're training a little bit now, but a lot of it is this rote memory. They want memory. That doesn't always serve great for the actual correlation of understanding in the moment what you do. And so I think it's neat to have that advice from that guy of hey, look, maybe it's important, but it's probably more important to how do you handle that. So it's kind of funny how you get these tidbits, and sometimes it comes from a crotchety old guy.
Yeah, of course.
So what exactly was your mission then in the UH-60?
Yeah, so I was a medevac pilot, so air ambulance.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you were in the National Guard. For our listeners that get confused like me of the Army versus National Guard, what does that really mean? I know that you ended up deploying. How often does the National Guard deploy? What does that all look like?
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, save lives, and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
So honestly, the National Guard is no different than the regular Army, except for most of your members work every other weekend, and they have like a 2-week tour during the summer or whenever. But you have to think, in the National Guard, there's still facilities, there's still equipment that needs to be maintained and used. So there are full-time National Guard soldiers. There might be active guard, active duty National Guard, or federal civil service technicians. So on a GS or wage grade schedule type of pay. Especially if you're in aviation, you have to fly to maintain your currency. So you're going to fly. The main difference is, regular Army is that they're federally funded, where in the National Guard, we have federal funds and state funds because we also have a state mission. So we could get activated for, overseas type missions, more federal funded. But in Florida specifically, like we have hurricanes, so we would be activated for state funds or state-specific missions. I was in for 12 years, and I was active duty in some facet for all 12 years with the National Guard.
Yeah, it's really cool. You're right. I guess in Florida, you probably have a lot of action from the National Guard deploying and during weather events and things like that. Is that a majority of what you were doing was kind of launching and, recovering and doing medevac for post-hurricanes, tornadoes, things like that?
Yep. Specifically for me, most of my time full-time for the Guard was when I was in human resources and stuff. So what I would do is go to all these units who were deploying overseas, get them prepped and stuff ready for what they were about to go do. In 2004, when I went off to flight school, so that's about a year or so, I came back and worked. Actually, before I went to flight school, I knew when I came home from flight school that we were headed to Iraq. So I knew that before I even left for flight school. I was home for flight school for a few months, went off to my 60 training, came back, and then we went off to deployment. So, that was the whole process. About 5 years in total, I think, post-flight schools and the military. I did some state mission stuff when I came back. I worked in our state EOC to help with hurricane reliefs and things like that. So a lot of my stuff, again, was pre that. So mostly deployments overseas.
Wow.
Flying in that capacity.
Yeah, that's crazy. And again, just another reason why we love our veterans for, going over and protecting us and, acting very selfless, so kudos to you. Of course, we appreciate that. I'm guessing at some points too, during that deployment, I feel like helicopter pilots are like very mission oriented, right? Like we love a mission, we love a task. Sometimes that mission is flying somewhere to get a burger. Sometimes it's, flying in Iraq and serving, a wartime purpose. But I'm guessing there was times over there when you're serving that, you were probably doing some pretty cool missions.
Yeah. So the majority of our missions, it's all medical. So point of injury to hospital, full throttle. As fast as you can get to point A to point B. Hot landing zones, meaning that they're taking active fire. We're taking active fire. If it was a helicopter accident, to go in and try to rescue patients. We would do inter-facility patient transfer sometimes. We had one young lady we would take once a month to go get her dialysis, a local national girl. One time it was just one flight, but we all tried to do rock, paper, scissors for it, but we had to take a canine dog who was injured. We all wanted to take the dog. I wasn't the one who was selected for that one. But, it's really everything was just pure medical, point of injury to the hospital. That was the majority of all of our flights.
It's, it's very intense. Like you say, active, coming into active fire. You're saving lives, you're saving fellow soldiers' lives. There's a lot of mission pressure. How do you as a pilot and how does the military as a whole mitigate safety and making decisions in that type of environment?
It's a great question. I think for my team at that time, because we were a really small team, I had a great captain who didn't put pressure on us, was very matter of fact with us. We had a great intel and threat brief. And I'll tell you, if it was an American soldier who was down and injured, we had the drive and push to go. In fact, when we were in Iraq, we were the only medical team who would fly single ship without gunship support. So they would always call us if someone else would turn it down because they couldn't get a gunship like an Apache to fly with them. They would call us because they knew we would go. Is that a bad decision hindsight? I don't think so. We wouldn't push it, right? If the weather was going to be bad or some other stuff, we wouldn't go. It wouldn't put us in jeopardy. If we could go, we would go. It's hard. It's hard if it's an American soldier. You want to go and do everything that you can to support them.
Of course.
I don't feel that we ever put ourselves in jeopardy. I never felt unsafe in anything that we did. We never pushed the boundaries of weather. Sometimes you go in to save a life when it's taking active fire because that's what you do as a medevac pilot. I have no regrets about any of those decisions between us as a crew and the other crews.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, helicopters, whether overseas or even here stateside, are incredible, right? For the capability, and I can't imagine how many lives have been saved by helicopters, whether it's in wartime. I was reflecting it over this past weekend. This is probably late news by the time this episode comes out, but very recently, obviously, these horrible floods in the hill country of Texas, where I used to live. I lived for 10 years, just about 20 minutes away from where all that's happening. So it feels close to home. But you're seeing on TV all the helicopters, the law enforcement helicopters, the Coast Guard. I'm sure the Air Guard is in there for Texas. Doing these hoist rescues, saving lives. And I think that's one of the most incredible things about helicopters. I think by and large, helicopters, I've said it before, have a PR problem. There's been big issues with helicopters, right? And when they crash, it's usually catastrophic, loss of life. Kobe Bryant certainly did not help with that. And so, looking at, helicopters as a whole in the mission set, it's always great to talk with aviators like you that have used the helicopter as a tool of helping other people. And in your case, it was during wartime. In my case, I got to do it from a civilian aspect of flying air medical, which I thought that was really neat. Like, man, this is a skill that I have that allows me to help someone when they're having a really bad day. And, that's an incredible power in that. And I think that that's a magical part of helicopters. I'm trying to shift, PR, a very small little voice within the world. But, I hope that if there's people out there that are listening that maybe aren't helicopter specific people, they realize that the impact that helicopters have on the economy, on safety, on rescues and things like that. So
to your point, I loved flying air ambulance, both military and civilian and law enforcement. But when you have these natural disasters or these events, it just shows you that helicopters are not going anywhere. They're a valuable resource, and the pilots who fly them are even more invaluable.
Yeah, I 100% agree. We're in a very weird time, right? Technology is advancing at lightning speed, and there's a lot of hype about unmanned aircraft. And there's actually some really neat technologies. I had Hector on from Rotor AI. They're doing some incredible things with autonomy specific to the Robinson platform.
Right.
But I 100% agree with you, Kodey. Like I think that's the helicopter right there, right? That mission set. And I do think that you need a human in the seat to understand that. So I am interested to see, what the future looks like for pilots in seats. It's a little bit scary. I also understand that certification might be, I'm never a big fan of bureaucratic process to a point. But in this case, these regulators could take as long as they want to certify some of these new technologies, because I think that that's going to be the biggest hurdle for a lot of these is certification and kind of navigating that. Something that I'm always curious about, I've had the pleasure of knowing a ton of military pilots, specifically pilots that I met through my air medical training when I was going to air medical, when I do my training and my indoc and whatnot. It was like me and then all the other students except one other guy was all prior military. And it was about a 50-50 split. 50% of the class that was military kind of really was adapting well to this civilian style flying. There's a couple guys in there that had, ended up flying Robinson aircraft, got their CFI, so they weren't just coming, say, from a Black Hawk into, say, a 407 or a Long Ranger or whatever it might be. But some of the military folks I saw were having kind of a hard time single pilot management. You're always used to having, an SIC, 2-pilot crew, your battle buddy, all these things. And it was a little bit of a harder transition. They all were successful. They all made it. They're all continuing to fly today. But did you have some struggle at all adapting from military to civilian? Not that, and I want to reiterate it for the audience, not that military pilots are bad pilots, but when you're flying, say, in Iraq, and you're flying a Black Hawk, which is a very capable aircraft, and you're taking fire, and you're flying very fast approaches, and you're slamming it on the ground, and you're going, and you're doing that as different flying, right? It's just a whole different mindset. And I saw it when I flew with military pilots as a flight instructor. So what was that like for you, Kodey?
As always, a special thanks to HeliCASTS for producing this podcast. Specializing in helicopter evaluations, faster sales, and superb service, HeliCASTS is the go-to agency for clients expecting immediate results. HeliCASTS' team of helicopter professionals are the best in the business. Using their aviation expertise, a nationwide network, and a proprietary 76-step listing strategy, HeliCASTS will convert your listing from Mayday to payday. Ready to get started? Text helicopter to 1-855-HeliCASTS. That's helicopter to 1-855-735-5226. And a HeliCASTS pilot agent will reach out. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.
Yeah, obviously my journey is probably a little different, and so I can only speak to that. When I came home from the military, I took a break and just kind of recalibrated myself, if you will. And then I went to a flight school here in Florida, and I got my CFI and my double I, and that flight school flew Schweitzers. So I went from a Black Hawk to a Schweitzer, and that was that was hard. I could not wrap my head around the simplicity of the aircraft. I didn't understand how these 8 V belts could transfer. It was just that was my learning curve. I just couldn't get how simple it was. And then obviously having to manipulate the throttle. So I think for me, that was a huge benefit, right? Because I went and got those 2 things. And then I taught at that flight school for a couple of years. So I think for me, that really helped me understand the civilian world better. I think that helped me understand the trajectory and growth of how civilian pilots come about. But I remember sitting in my CFI class, and I'm like, I'd sit next to these young kids, and they had 150 hours. I'm like, whew, how are you going to teach people? You only have 150 hours. And you're like, that's how it's done. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Blind leading
you
the
just
blind.
learned.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about that a lot on the podcast, especially if we have, say, a Canadian on. Canadians do it very differently. They get their commercial and then they go and fly forever. And then, becoming an instructor is a bit of like a victory lap, at the end of your career. Whereas here in the States, I think I had 200 hours or whatever it was. And now you're going to go teach, people how to fly helicopters, and in my case, a Robinson R-22, which I love, but it's a, semi-rigid, low inertia, helicopter. You got to really mind your P's and Q's. And by and large, it works, right? Even the flight school that I was at, Hillsboro, now it's Hillsboro Heli Academy. I think, golly, they're probably approaching 35, 40,000 hours of training in an R-22 with very little incident. There's little hiccups here and there when I was at flight school, and there was one severe crash, but that was like in 30 years. And so it is funny. It shouldn't work the way it works, but it does, and I think it's flight schools do a pretty good job at mitigating that. By the way, I love the Schweitzer. I had the CEO Schweitzer on the podcast, and I see him at all the shows. Super cool guy. And I love, the Schweitzer's a great aircraft to fly. We had one at Hillsboro, and I was lucky enough to fly, and I always enjoyed my Schweitzer time. So yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, integrating into, say, a Schweitzer and then working as a flight instructor for a couple of years. I mean, at that point, I would really say that you have all the same civilian style of training that, I had. And so I'm guessing that going into the secondary careers, I want to make sure that we get to this. So I love talking about helicopter flying specifically, but something that caught my eye on your CV was, SMS, this safety management system. It's a bit of a buzzword, I guess. I think the buzz of it's kind of gone down a little bit, but it's something to me that's so important. I was lucky at Hillsboro again. Hillsboro Heli Academy, of course, is a sponsor. So I love when I get to just naturally talk about them because they do things right. One of the things that they did right is this SMS. I remember from a very early on, I mean, I'm talking 12 plus years ago when I was there in their management, they were implementing SMS. They had a safety manager, and this whole idea of just culture and then understanding incidents and things that happen around the facility, not just in the helicopter, but you trip when the line guy tripped when he was fueling the helicopter, and just kind of understanding that and the just culture. But you have a high level understanding of SMS. I'm curious to hear your perspective of what SMS is for our listeners that might not be familiar. And then I have a secondary follow-up to that, but let's just start there.
Yep. I love how you talked about the flight school, especially the fueler, because they are part of the safety management system. I go into many organizations and they specifically talk about the flight department and SMS. And I'm like, wait, and SMS is systematic across the whole of your organization. It's not just about your flight department. It's about your maintenance department. It's about your human resource department. It's about everybody in your organization. They're all part of it. So I really value that you said that. It's about the organization taking their ownership and ensuring the safety of their employees and having that commitment to providing the resources needed to ensure that happens. And it's about the frontline employees feeling safe to report and talk about things that are happening in the organization up through the channels. And then management saying, oh man, thank you for that. We didn't know, right? Because frontline employees see things. They know when things are missed, and they know if a process isn't right or shouldn't be that way. They know it first because they live it every day. So you want to hear from them. So give them an opportunity to let you know. So it's work. So you know how the work in the organization is actually being done, not how you imagine it's done, but you want to know how it's really being done in the organization. And culture, that to your point, is catastrophic to that. Being open and free with your employees, not blaming them for things, but actually looking at yourself and saying, okay, what is our ownership in this? What did we do as part of this, and how can I make it better? Are all super important part of SMS.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, one of the things that you're saying is organization really has to buy into this, right? I've been a part of organizations, including big organizations that have SMS, and they have SMS as a plug and play. They don't really use it. They think it's stupid. They'll even tell you as much during the training. Then I've been part of organizations like Hillsboro and then Air Evac Life Team, actually, also very, very good at that. This idea of really taking ownership and implementing SMS, not just to implement it, but actually like putting it into the DNA, the fabric of the operation, and really living it. Case in point, I had a couple experiences as a line guy. I remember one experience where I wasn't using a wing walker and I was pushing around a Jet Ranger on a dolly with a electro cart, and I ran the tail into a fuel trailer, and no one was there. No one would have saw it. When I ran it in, it didn't hit it that hard. There was no visible or outward damage to the aircraft, but at that point we had a just culture. So I knew I could go directly to my manager, fill out an SMS report, self-report that I had this incident. They would go through kind of the whole analysis, and as long as nothing was like just out of pure negligence,
Right.
they learned that we had poor I can never say the word implement. I can't say it. They didn't implement, SOPs properly of making sure that line guys knew that we had to have wing walkers. No one ever did. Like we did a bunch of stuff solo all the time. I mean, we didn't even staff enough people to have wing walkers. So they found out that this was not a Halsey issue. It was a systemic issue.
Right.
Right. And so they had to make adjustments as a company. And interestingly enough, it's new ownership now, so it's different. But the overall culture at that time was, in my opinion, not great. But the just culture was fantastic, right? So it's interesting that you can have maybe a culture that's a little intense and you don't love being part of. But man, I will say they knocked it out of the park with the just culture and really believing in that. And then again, I've had other organizations that don't really seem to care, and I think that's a big problem. I talked to a lot of small 135 operators, Part 91 now for, say, 91, 147 LOAs and things like that are also requiring SMS. And there's just a lot of plug and play. And it's just a checkbox. To those folks out there that just want SMS as a checkbox, what would be your rally cry to them?
This is so great. So I was speaking with a friend the other day, a really small organization, and they bought an off-the-shelf manual. And I think he was saying it's like 180 pages of stuff. And I was like, oh, for your organization, that is too much. In my opinion, they wasted money on this plug and play. It's not accurate for their company. It's going to more intimidate their employees than be functional. Don't be afraid to bring someone in to actually make a manual that follows what you actually do. And then also helps bridge the gaps of things where you could improve, right? A little bit of investment up front will save in the back.
Oh, huge.
And SMS is really not hard. It's not hard. It is extremely easy. All it is just capturing the things that you do, capturing that data, documenting that you do it. And that's it. It's super easy. And when you buy those off-the-shelf books, they encapsulate so many things that your organization probably doesn't do and doesn't need to do. So you're going to spend more work redacting or taking out information that you don't need, or trying to build processes to match a manual of things that you don't do, right? I just don't understand it. Another thing for me, and when I work with companies on SMS, I like to lead with training. Because if your employees don't understand what a safety management system is, if they don't understand the difference between a hazard and a risk, if they don't understand how to report, when it starts to roll out to them, they're going to have apprehension and fear. But if they understand it and they know their part and their involvement in it, they're going to be more open and they're going to be more open to it, right? They're going to want to be a part of it. So
absolutely.
I like to lead with training.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, it's always a common, and the industry is getting better. Light years ahead of where we were probably even, say, 10, 15 years ago when it comes to safety and SMS and really buying into it, which, that's the important part, is this idea of buy-in. But this idea where you can just kind of plug and play is, I think it's just human nature to think, until you experience something that's catastrophic, I think it's maybe hard for these smaller operators to fully validate or understand the importance, right? One accident, you could have a one helicopter operation, a little small, single pilot 135 flying around in an aircraft that can hold 6 or 7 passengers. You crash, all 6 or 7 passengers die. That's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Not only is there loss of life, which is a huge impact and a ripple effect through all the people that were close to that individual that lost their life, but from the financial aspect, which I think is what people are trying to avoid by setting up an SMS properly to begin with, the financial impact could be catastrophic. I mean, the insurance, it's all crazy, right? So it's like, not only is it an investment in safety and helping people not die, which should be probably the most important part of it, especially in the helicopter industry, but it's also an investment in protecting you with liability and future potential catastrophic loss financially. And so I think that operators need to really wrap their head around that. I have a unique perspective or a unique position sometimes in my helicopter sales business where I get to create relationships with a lot of really neat people and people that are just getting into aviation and starting 135s. And look, it's often an afterthought, a plug and play SMS, safety stupid. And it's like, no, it's not. So I get to go and kind of advocate. So I think that's neat that you're involved in SMS. And I think the more we can talk about SMS and the more that companies really buy into it, I think then we can have an industry that's a lot safer. And we're definitely moving in the right direction.
Yeah. And when I talk about SMS, it really is it's just a communication tool. I mean, that helps front management talk to the line service and, frontline employees and vice versa. But, I think smaller operators, they know and understand SMS from 121 operators. And so they don't understand how it can be so small. They're like, there's only 2 pilots and 2 maintainers. Like if something happens with the aircraft, my other pilot, he knows about it, or the maintainer knows about it. I'm like, that's okay. Then just write it down on a piece of paper and put it on file, document it. Maybe, maybe just to your point, maybe you're out there by yourself and nobody knows about it. And that happens to you, but it probably happens to the other person all the time as well. So just talking about it, but put it on a piece of paper, put it on a spreadsheet. If you don't have to have some fancy software program. And then this allows you to, one, show the FAA that you're capturing these insights. But when you're these smaller operators, if you're doing power line patrols, fire work, usually those who you contract with want to see that you have an SMS, and now you can show them, right? You can show them the data that you do. So that also helps your business, right? Get more.
Well, yeah, it's incredible what I found out in management, because I was part of the management at that point and we were rolling out SMS. It was crazy to see how many issues the company had that none of us knew about that were systemic to safety and other things, right? A high number of overflying required inspections, right? It's like, it would happen, I guess, occasionally, but then you have the SMS and then you start saying, oh man, this is happening all the time. So then we put in some new practices of making sure that helicopters that needed inspections or had open discrepancies wouldn't get dispatched by a dispatcher, right? So you learn all these things, again, sometimes in SMS, like it's just a freak accident, right? A person falls or there's an accident in a helicopter. It's truly just an accident. But oftentimes we found that it was systemic in this idea that, SOPs weren't being followed consistently, or there wasn't proper training, or there wasn't even an SOP in place. And so I think the organization itself got stronger and stronger. So really neat. We are approaching time, and I have to talk about Helo Girls. It's actually what caught my eye when I was perusing LinkedIn and kind of prospecting for guests, and I came across your profile, and immediately I was drawn to Helo Girls. So tell me about Helo Girls. Tell me about why this kind of why you decided to become an author of children's books, and I'm just curious of that whole experience and what that's been like.
The Vertical MRO podcast is powered by Vertical Magazine, the rotorcraft industry's #1 trusted multimedia resource. Visit Vertical Mag Media on YouTube to gain access to exclusive videos featuring operators in the field and more unique content from the pages of Vertical. Subscribe today to stay informed and inspired.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something that's become a passion project, but it really culminates from all of my time in aviation and as an aviation safety aficionado. As a parent, when I had my daughter, I would try to find helicopter books I wanted to share with her. She was always around the aircraft with me, but I wanted to read books to her at night about it. And at the time, there were not a lot. It was what it was. So years later, when I had my son, I would once again try to find books, and there were more books. A lot of them were not accurate to what we do in the mission. They weren't very safety forward and didn't often feature a female. So that was just a little frustration for myself. I'm also someone, as I said, I like to stay really busy, which means my brain doesn't shut down very well in the evening. So it takes me a long time to fall asleep. So I would just lay down and I would kind of tell myself these little stories. And in a conversation with my husband, I just kind of got to this point where, I thought it would be interesting to do a book. Coupled with all of that, I go to all these industry events where they would talk about, how we need more pilots, we need more maintainers. And we do. We definitely need all these new bodies to come into the aviation industry. But they're going to high schools and they're going to colleges to talk to them and to recruit them to come in, which is great. And I hope they continue to do that. But to your point, you loved aviation from being a child. If we could plant that seed in a child from very young, we'll have someone who's passionate about the industry for the rest of their life. Now, whether they become a pilot or a maintainer or a food service prep or interior design or aircraft design and manufacturing, that's going to bring more people into our sector, right? And so I just think getting that all in inspiration when they're really young is what we should look to do to really bolster our industry. Now, I know that's the long game, but let's do it. So I just thought I'd start with Helo Girls. So do something that's accurate. The books are very accurate. We talk about FLIR systems. We talk about buckets. They're very safety forward. The crew does a brief. They do a post brief. And why not have some awesome female pilots?
I love that.
That goes.
Yeah, it's really cool. Look, as as being fiscally responsible, we're told to have different investments, including long-term, investments, right? I have 30-year accounts that I don't plan on touching until I'm, 65 or whatever. And, I think it's case in point that we also need to be constantly investing, in the future, right? Not just in aviation, but, everything. Like for me, I'm a new dad, right? 3 or 4 weeks now. And I'm already thinking like, man, I have this giant responsibility to make sure that my daughter becomes a nice person that contributes to society, right? So I want to start investing right away in her education and, just investing on, how to be a good human and how to be a person. And then if you can find something that your child is passionate about and then support that with fun and entertaining books like Helo Girls, then that can just only further lock it in, right? And inspire people. And I think for women specifically, there's always been a lack of representation within aviation. And I think to this day, it's very still much the case. I mean, I don't know what the percentages are. Maybe you do, but I don't. The female pilots have to be, and maintainers specifically, have to be pretty low percentage-wise. And I think, we're missing out on 50% of the population to help us fill. You call any maintenance shop right now, ask them what their biggest problem is. It's finding people, right? And I only know like 1 or 2 female mechanics, right? So like, how do we get these little girls, excited about aviation? And I think it's through Helo Girls. I think it's through other people like Lee. I don't know if you know Lee Coates. She's on Instagram and she has her candy cane helicopter. And I don't think there's a lot of influencers that do helicopter things right all the time, but I think that she does. I think that she's a safe pilot. She's a badass pilot doing really cool things. She has an awesome entrepreneurial background. So I think people like her, people like you, give a face to women in aviation. So I think it's really important. And so I think it's so commendable. I hope that I can get a signed copy to Aubrey for Helo Girls. I don't know if we can make that happen or not.
Of course we can. Of course we can.
I think that'd be so cool. I'm not reading to her yet, but just a year or 2 away from that, and so excited. How many books are in the series of Helo Girls?
Yeah, so right now I have 2 published books. So the first book is The Firefighting Pilot, and the second book is The Law Enforcement Pilot. The third book is The Air Ambulance Pilot, and that's in, I guess, production right now. It's with the illustrator. So we've gone back and forth on a couple of technical details. All the renderings are done. We're just going to add colors soon, and then it'll go off to printing later this year. And it'll be ready to go early next year, which I'm excited about.
And something that you corrected me on when we first talked is that Helo Girls isn't just for little girls. It's also for little boys too, right? Little boys can be inspired through Helo Girls. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's called Helo Girls. I read the Hardy Boys growing up. So it's not just, it's not about, the book isn't about girls. It has a girl pilot. Right, she introduces herself at the beginning of the book, and then she's a pilot just through the rest of the book. It really normalizes it. The books are about the mission, about doing it safely, and about being a part of the team. Just so happens you have an awesome female pilot. I really find in my son, who is 7, loves the books. A lot of boys love the technical aspects of the books. Again, like the FLIR system and being able to find the suspect using the FLIR and the night vision goggles and stuff. So not just for girls, but definitely showcasing the women.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think that women are not showcased enough, specifically in aviation. So really admirable. And look, you walk the walk and you talk the talk, right? You've been a female within the industry, and you're a powerhouse. You've done, you've had different, military background, flag experience, air medical on the civilian side, law enforcement. You've integrated into having an ATP, CFI, CFII, credentials for safety. So look, you've done it all, and now you're helping inspire the next generation, which I think is really cool. For those listening that are interested in purchasing a copy of Helo Girls, where can they do that?
Yep, absolutely. Just on our website, it's helogirls.com.
All right, so I'm going to go to helogirls.com and get my Helo Girls book. I am going to tell you when I do it, though, because I want a signed copy.
Yeah,
And
every book that goes through my website, I sign. And
Okay,
you
I
can
love
always
that.
leave a note. And I
was going to say,
yeah.
to Aubrey is going to be important to me. So
Yeah, you can leave a note and ask me to sign a specific name, and I'm happy to do that. But I sign every
love
book
that.
from the website.
I love that. I started talking about my daughter. I get a little weepy-eyed. Golly, I'm getting soft here, Kodey.
Yep, and your heart is opening.
And on that, I think it's time to conclude this episode. Kodey, wow, what a career. And you're still at it. You're still killing it. And I love it. Love that you're focused around safety and bringing awareness to SMS. I think it's so important. We talk about this, critical, I forget what the name is, but, mission 0 or critical 0, no accidents. And I think a big part of that is organizations buying into safety and SMS. I also think that we're in a huge problem right now with recruitment, not just for young girls, but also boys and everyone in between. We don't have enough pilots. We don't have enough maintainers. We don't have people that are, passionate about aviation. And so I'm hoping books like Helo Girls and people like you within the industry can inspire the next generation. Again, to MHM Publishing and to the rest of our sponsors, thank you so much for making the Helicopter Podcast possible and helping give me a voice and having awesome guests on like Kodey. And of course, to our listeners, you guys rock. Go to, what's the web address again, Kodey?
It's just helogirls.com.
Okay, it's super easy. helogirls.com. Make sure that you go purchase that book. You don't have kids? Don't worry about it. It sounds like it's a sweet book anyway. Buy it, read it to your nephew, read it to your niece. You got to go and get the book. I'm excited to have it. And I will do a little review when Aubrey and I read it for the first time. So Kodey, thank you so much for coming on the Helicopter Podcast.
Thank you, Holly.
See ya. Please stay tuned for a final word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, save lives, and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
As always, a special thanks to HeliCASTS for producing this podcast. Specializing in helicopter evaluations, faster sales, and superb service, HeliCASTS is the go-to agency for clients expecting immediate results. HeliCASTS' team of helicopter professionals are the best in the business. Using their aviation expertise, a nationwide network, and a proprietary 76-step listing strategy, HeliCASTS will convert your listing from Mayday to payday. Ready to get started? Text helicopter to 1-855-HeliCASTS. That's helicopter to 1-855-735-5226. And a HeliCASTS pilot agent will reach out. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.
The Vertical MRO podcast is powered by Vertical Magazine, the rotorcraft industry's #1 trusted multimedia resource. Visit Vertical Mag Media on YouTube to gain access to exclusive videos featuring operators in the field and more unique content from the pages of Vertical. Subscribe today to stay informed and inspired.